tell me what the 5 mother sauces are. Now, I'll give you a hint. In high school, there was a girl who broke my heart. She did bad things to me. Her name was Beth V. I won't tell you her last name because that would be inappropriate, okay? Always remember Beth V. Bechamel, Espanol, Tomate, Hollandaise, Veloute, Beth V. Those are your 5 mother sauces, okay? And I say she broke my heart because the chef that trained me, oh man, every day when he was teaching me sauces, oh, it was brutal. That's why I say she broke my heart. All those mother sauces, just terrible. Every sauce, every dressing, every dipping, whatever, is derived from those 5 sauces, okay, in classical cooking, okay? Now, you can see the distinct color difference in all 3, right? It's kind of tough to tell between the white and the blonde, but there's a definite difference there, right? Really no questioning about the brown roux, okay? We can also make a black roux, which is when we actually take it down even farther. That's going to be for very specific kinds of dishes, okay? That's why we don't include it in the initial big 3, okay? There's a slack roux. A slack roux is when we have a little bit more fat than flour. Now, if I'm going to make a slack roux that's a little bit loose, what do you think I would want to use that for? Anybody have? Just think about it. Now, I'm just mixing it enough so it's going to be a white roux, right? What do you think I would want to use that in? Anybody ever make New England clam chowder? Anybody ever have New England clam chowder? Okay, how about a chicken corn chowder? Or any kind of chowder? No? Okay, so chowders are typically made with potatoes. Okay, that's kind of what makes a chowder. You put potatoes in. But potatoes, once they cook, they're going to release what? Starch. So they're going to thicken, right? So I don't want to put a real heavy white roux in with something that's going to simmer for a long time and have those potatoes in there, because then I'm going to wind up with a real pasty kind of sauce, right? So I use a slack roux. The butter is just going to taste good, but it's going to absorb that potato starch. That white roux is going to cook out in the milk or cream, right? So we're going to have a real nice smooth flavor, okay? So anything that you're going to put starch in as an ingredient, as a component of the dish, use a slack roux, but you got to be careful, because if it's too slack, your sauce is going to break, and then what I mean by break, you're going to have the fat sitting on top or on the surface of your sauce, and we really don't want that, okay? Cool. Questions so far about the roux? Yes?
Why do you stir the pan so much?
I didn't want it to burn. It's got to be constant movement. If I leave it in one spot, then what's going to happen is whatever is in contact with that pan, it's going to cook, and it's not going to be even, okay? So then if I make a brown roux like that, some of it will be darker, some of it will be lighter, and we'll have a real imbalance of flavors. So you want to make sure that you incorporate it and everything cooks evenly, okay? Titus.
What does the V stand for in Beth? V?
Veloute. Yep. And we have one more question back there. What was it?
It was gonna be like, what does black roux smell like?
I'm sorry?
What does black roux smell like? Like, is it
Burnt.
just more burnt?
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit more pungent than the brown roux. We're gonna have a much more. When I say a black roux, I don't want it burned, but we're gonna cook it even darker than the brown roux. Okay? Yes.
So when making all 3 like at the same time, you have to keep the heat the same, or increase?
You know, it depends. You saw how I increased the heat. Okay? You know, I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna heat my pan. I'll heat my fat for my white roux. Okay? But remember, I don't want to develop any color there, right? So I just want it warm enough or hot enough to incorporate, to mix, okay, and I take it off. To make my blonde roux, maybe I might crank it up just a little bit, okay, and you saw when I made the brown roux, turned it up even more, right? So you've got to do it in stages, okay? Yes?
Is there a substitute for fat or for butter?
Sure. You can use duck fat, you can use bacon fat, you can use olive oil, any kind of fat that you want. You can render down pork fat and use that, okay? A good friend of mine has a kosher restaurant. Now, when she's making matzo ball soup or she's making a chicken noodle soup, she can't use butter and meat at the same time. Kosher law doesn't allow them to use meat and dairy in the same dish, right? So, but they butcher all their own chicken. They break down all their own chicken. So they take all of that chicken fat and they render it down, meaning they melt it all down, and then they use the chicken fat mixed with flour to thicken their soup. Now, one, they save money because they've already paid for the chicken. Comes with fat, you just render that down, ta-da, right? They've kept kosher, they've remained consistent with their laws, and their roux tastes better. If I'm gonna thicken a chicken noodle soup, what's better than more chicken to add to that soup, right? So it all depends on what you're using, right? Use duck fat, you could use olive oil, you can use salad oil, you know. But just remember, whatever you're gonna create your roux with, that's gonna be the underlying flavor, okay? So depending on your dish, depending on your budget, depending on what your end result is, okay, you can use any number of different fats, okay? So that's why I say fat and not necessarily butter, okay? Butter is the most common use, fat that we use for roux, okay? But it's not the only one you can use, okay? That's your question? Okay. And remember we said a beurre manier, butter of the hen, right? And that's just taking a small amount of softened butter, rolling it in flour, and then putting it in at the end of your sauce making. Okay? It's going to give it flavor, it's going to help emulsify it, and it's also going to give it a nice shine. Okay? Yes?
Do you have a like fat that you prefer to use whenever you make a roux?
You know, obviously butter, because that's